Your company's future success demands agile, flexible, and resilient operations. I'm your host, Daphne Luchtenberg, and you're listening to McKinsey Talks Operations, a podcast where the world's C-suite leaders and McKinsey experts cut through the noise and uncover how to create a new operational reality. Accelerated innovation has been the driver of economic prosperity in the last 100 years, but today, R&D faces a range of hidden obstacles. Getting to the next step change in innovation is becoming more difficult, more complex, and more expensive. Each dollar spent on R&D delivers less innovation over time. Or in other words, R&D productivity is in decline. What can leaders do to reverse this trend? That's where the AI revolution comes in. AI has the potential to bend the curves of R&D productivity. Our latest research shows that AI could substantially accelerate R&D processes across a set of industries. But these advances in science and technology alone won't move the needle. Realizing the potential of AI to accelerate innovation also requires the organization to change. And that brings us to today's episode. I'm excited to welcome Google Cloud's Ravi Rajamani, Managing Director and Global Head of AI Black Belts, as well as Ben Meigs, an Associate Partner in McKinsey's Product Development Practice. They recently got together on a panel at McKinsey's annual R&D Leaders Forum and had such a great conversation, we wanted to bring that insights to our McKinsey Talks Operations audience. Ravi and Ben, great to have you both here today.
Thank you, Daphne, and thank you, Ben. Happy to be here.
Great to be with you.
Ben, why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit more about the trends you're seeing in AI and how it's being used in R&D.
So we've seen a real shift in the past 12 to 18 months with significant uptake for AI in engineering and R&D in hardware industry. So industries like auto, aerospace, and heavy industrials. Most people know that Gen AI has a really strong track record already in software engineering, right? And the hardware domain is more challenging for many reasons, and including the fact that hardware products have a major software component that needs to be integrated with the hardware. But we are seeing AI progress accelerating. Most companies in these spaces are at least piloting AI for their hardware engineering teams. And the more mature ones are actively using a handful of use cases regularly. These use cases range from customer insights and research, where companies are testing concepts much more rapidly and in a more analytical way. Design generation, so things like prompt-to-CAD 3D models. They're being used in validation, so both reducing physical testing and streamlining simulation. And there's an emerging use case for agent orchestration around kind of all aspects of the digital thread where product data lies throughout the lifecycle. There's all sorts of exciting, I think, groundbreaking work that's happening, and it's real.
Very interesting. And Ravi, this is where I'd love to bring you in. I'm really excited to have you on, since Google is absolutely a leader in adopting AI into your own engineering practice. As your CEO, Sundar Pichai, stated recently, 30% of Google's code is now generated by AI. So can you talk a little bit about how Google approaches this and what it took you all to get there?
Yeah, Sundar announced publicly that 30% of all new code at Google is now generated with assistance from AI. And this figure continues to increase. It was over 25% just a few months ago, right? This underscores really what we see as a rapid internal adoption by Googlers and the effectiveness of our AI tools. A lot of times customers ask me, how do I interpret that 30%, for example, that stat? The way I say it is, developers are leveraging AI-generated suggestions for nearly 1 out of every 3 code changes, right? While this percentage of AI code is impressive, at Google, we still continue to consistently emphasize the role of human oversight. The code is reviewed and accepted by engineers, highlighting that as Ben also said, it's profoundly augmenting human work across many, many different industries and many, many different use cases. More than incentives, you asked a question, what it took us to get there. And we are still learning, we are still evolving this one, right? More than incentives, what I have seen, at least from our internal teams, is adoption was heavily influenced by the amount of trust people have in this AI-generated code. And this absolutely influences the tool adoption, right? And when you say trust, it's one end of the spectrum could be zero trust. The other end could be 100% trust. I don't think both are right. That's not appropriate. I think you want to find what is the happy medium. And it is not unique to AI. Today, when developers like humans build code, we have 100% code reviews. So it's the same thing. We want to do it for our AI generated code too. So processes have to evolve. The tool with AI is evolving so fast. But our overarching sort of vision for application development is deeply centered around how you can embed AI throughout the entire life cycle, software life cycle. We'll talk about some of the use cases that Ben said. The learnings translate very, very nicely. But the idea here is this is a holistic integration that reflects more of a strategic imperative rather than, AI is just another tool, start using it. Our expectation is all Googlers would embrace these tools, signifying a fundamental shift in how our work is performed.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, actually, let me come to you. And as Ravi is describing kind of how this shift is taking place at Google, which I'm sure is kind of leading the way. Are we seeing these developments and shifts emerge in a similar way in other organizations?
We're seeing them in pockets. I think one area where there's more maturity is the simulation domain. So I think there was a stat from NAFEMS, which is the industry association for simulation and analysis, and at their recent conference, 30% of all of the new methods published by simulation researchers were using AI for simulation. And we've seen companies that have replaced large portions of what is traditionally a physics-based simulation workflow, so very compute heavy, with AI surrogates. And so there's more maturity there, but I think we aren't really seeing most companies at the sort of maturity that you're talking about, Ravi, when it comes to hardware engineering in these complex products.
That's really interesting. So let's shift gears a little bit and then talk about AI implementations at companies that have to incorporate both software and hardware engineering into their products. The model landscape is changing quickly and numerous major models are being released over the last few months. So Ravi, what are you seeing in terms of these models that excel at research and engineering workflows? And how should companies think about model selection?
The pace of innovation in this market is insane. I mean, I'm a practitioner, every day I see new models, new tools that just keep getting better and better, right? In the brief period, when these AI models have been available and cuts across multiple software, hardware domains, across industries, organizations of all sizes and market segments are not just experimenting, as what Ben mentioned. We are starting to see customers put this into production across their work and across their domain. And doing so at a speed rarely seen with, new technology, right? I mean, this is just taking off fast. So that brings a lot of, C-level folks to think about, okay, how should I be evaluating? How should I be thinking about integrating AI into my, in this case, let's take R&D, the life cycle, right? How do I automate repetitive tasks? How do I accelerate complex processes? Our strategy at Google is anchored on what we call as a platform-first approach, because we do recognize models are going to come, all over the place. We have first-party models. What we part of our Gemini family, 2.5 Pro is the latest. Comes in different flavors. Flash Pro, for example, essentially to cater to different customer requirements for performance, speed, etc., cost. We also, as part of our platform, offer third-party models such as Anthropic Claude. And then a whole suite of open source models, because we are also seeing a lot of customers have very unique use cases, especially in regulated markets, where they want to combine, a cloud sort of model as well as, something that could run at the edge. So we are starting to see some really, really interesting use cases. But across the board, our customers are asking for choice and optionality built across the platform. And that's really what our strategy is through the platform strategy.
Yeah, fascinating. So Ben, coming back to you. So with this proliferation of choice, you've got to make some decisions. So how should R&D departments think about their AI investments? You're working with many companies who are kind of navigating this question. What are you hearing from them?
This is the really important question that everybody's asking right now, right? And I think I'll just echo a little bit of what you said before, Ravi, on the point around sort of tech and model choices, right? I think we're seeing the same thing of no company wants to be locked into a certain vendor just because of the pace that this is all evolving, right? So almost the organizational capacity to test and learn and ingest new technology and swap it out, right, is something that is a muscle that companies are needing to build. And then when it comes to, what are you really going to fund in terms of what domains, what functions, what use cases, that's the question. And if you follow our publishing, we at McKinsey talk a lot about the importance of an ROI based approach and prioritization, both for R&D projects and for other investments. This is super important for AI investment. The thing is with AI, there often isn't a good basis of estimate for savings because it's also new. So we find the best way to demonstrate value of an AI use case is with a simple, lean proof of concept that where you measure the impact on productivity and the quality of output and other business or technical KPIs that you're seeking to achieve with that use case. And then, so companies do need some budget just kind of for experimentation. You don't want too high of a bar with just getting your foot in the door and doing that testing so you can move quickly. Now, where you need to bring in the high rigor is on prioritizing the much larger investment needed to scale up, backing the proven use cases that have demonstrated the largest impact. And you really can't try to do them all. I will just say, not all domains are created equal. So you have to think about what's your company's strategy. If you're a company whose value creation is rooted in R&D, applying AI to R&D workflows is likely to be one of your highest, if not the highest, ROI levers. So you need to start thinking about AI investment the way you think about R&D investment overall.
Let me talk about my own company. I mean, Google, our approach to AI adoption is not just about deployment, right? This is, as I said, this is not just about, hey, we have checkbox. It is about measurable impact, like what Ben said. I mean, you need to have, a value framework that strategically measures the impact that AI is bringing through, right? I mean, if you look at a certain workflow or a task that can be time saved through AI applications, then you can save that time into more valuable, high impact work, right? So one way to kind of look at that is AI is an accelerator for innovation. So this goes beyond just a simple output, more towards a nuanced understanding of how AI can contribute to the domain that you're in, like R&D, right? I mean, what is the strategic fit here? How well do your AI initiatives align with what your top level goals are, but also invest strategically to get your workforce excited, because a lot of times they know the domain really well, right? I mean, that's finding that balance is what we think at Google is really interesting, because a lot of these great ideas come from Googlers themselves, right? I'm like, oh, let's go do this. And then suddenly we have a quick pure prototype built out, and then, okay, let's go, invest more, right?
I love that, Ravi. And just to jump in here, I totally agree. And Google is such a great kind of cultural example of encouraging bottom-up innovation. There's a balance because you need sort of some coordination, but where I've seen companies succeeding, it is exactly that, where they encourage everyone to experiment and build, right? And there's some resources and some, common governance, which I think we're going to talk about next, behind it. That culture is so important.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben, for lining me up on that one. Indeed, because, it's not just about technology that's going to move the needle, right? It really also is about thinking through the governance, the operating models that are needed to successfully adopt and scale AI, specifically in engineering and R&D. Ravi, let's come back to you then. What do you think are the key success factors there?
Yeah, most enterprise customers that, we talk to say the AI investment is multifaceted because it impacts multiple areas of how they do business today. You want to emphasize what the strategic sort of alignment is. How do I do this responsibly so that, sometimes they have an existing sort of way to do it, their revenue stream, for example. How does that impact, your business, implementing AI? From a governance standpoint, it starts with, what sort of data governance and platform foundation that you have, right? You have to leverage your data, which could be sitting in multiple data stores across, silos. How do you now use that into leverage that into a unified platform for building your AI models, like, training, deploying, managing these things at scale? So the governance aspect of it, and then, depending on which industry you are, I would argue all industries, right? Like bias, like in your data, like how do you control the quality? How do you now operate AI at scale? These are things that need to be anchored on a strong organizational / governance strategy, right? I would personally today not trust AI 100%, right? Just like we don't trust 100% of human written code. So what does that mean? We need to have a governance for code reviews in place, and for good reasons, right? So I think melding some of these, enterprise sort of, hey, where your data stores are, who manages that, what sort of data is piped into your model building, how do I build, in some cases, what we call as an eval framework, because you go from model version to another model version. So many different changes happening. But how do you make sure there are no regressions, or you don't go back on functionality, or the model starts behaving, in a way that you didn't anticipate, right? So these are things, of course, it's a burgeoning area of research, but there are lots of, best practices already that, we work with customers on.
Mm-hmm. Ben?
I think the other kind of organizational consideration here is, I think Ravi used the word, this is going to be a fundamental shift in how we work. And I think you need to extend that thinking to your entire product development process. To get the largest benefit from AI, you can't just automate steps in that legacy process. You need to fundamentally rethink the way that products are, concepted, designed, and taken to market really end to end. Ravi, also liked your point about we don't trust 100% of human written code. That's why you have code reviews. And in hardware engineering, you have stage gates. The stage gates that worked for human engineers 20, 30, 40 years ago will need to change probably significantly with AI. There's many steps that are probably going to be eliminated, and many others that will be able to be done in parallel instead of in a waterfall approach. But on the other hand, new checks are needed. So as an example, we work with a turbine manufacturer who took 11 months out of an 18-month process by using AI for design optimization. And this company was able to remove a bunch of stage gate steps, but they also added AI model validation as a stage gate criteria before starting that optimization process to offset the more limited human role in the process, right? So if you're not rethinking that sort of end to end, right, you're going to miss out on a lot of the real benefits that AI can bring.
Got it. Hey, and, of course, AI is changing every aspect of life and of work. But there seems to be such a lot of organizational inertia still to overcome. So how should we be thinking about incentivizing and motivating teams to drive the adoption of AI? And how can we drive the mindset shift and successfully scale it? Ben, what do you think?
It's such an important point. And we work with companies all the time on these big, difficult changes for their employees. And this is the biggest. I think specifically about the kind of the engineering domain, companies need to understand how deploying AI is going to impact an employee's experience, the good and the bad. Most engineers got into the job because they love solving hard problems. They love building products. AI can take away a lot of the administrative work that just sucks time out for those engineers and make the job more creative and exciting, right? But it can also be a bit scary too. I mean, every day in the news, there's talk about, job elimination because of AI. And so companies need to harness that narrative, really start talking about the successes where individual people built use cases that freed up their time or achieved a better result in terms of the product or the customer success. And then kind of more broadly, you need a deliberate strategy for the change management. And this needs to include things like, are your leaders role modeling it? Do your leaders use AI? Do they talk about how they use AI? Upskilling for people to get them comfortable with using AI, not just the early adopters. And then also reinforcing with formal mechanisms. So this is your stage gate process. And it's also things like performance reviews. We've heard of some companies having that actually be a more substantial criteria in how they're evaluating employees. And you need this holistic approach. It can't just be one mechanism.
And Ravi, just on that, I mean, how is that manifest at Google?
Well, first off, totally agree with what Ben was saying. I think it starts with the leadership team, the executive team. They must foster a culture of experimentation and agility, right? You have to encourage, in some cases, iterative improvements over perfect solutions, right? I mean, Google, if you looked at our consumer business, we constantly keep adding, right? Because you fail fast, you process that feedback, you're able to respond back to your customers much, much quicker. So that pace of innovation and what we call as psychological safety, that has to come from your leadership team on down, right? Fundamentally, you cannot view AI as a short-term trend. This is a big technological shift, fundamental, that drives how you build innovation, how you grow, and how you operate in this new sort of world, right? And then try to have a holistic view, right? AI cannot be done in silo, is my point, right? it has to start with a cross-functional alignment. And then, of course, you do have to recognize there are teams and individuals in part of the resistance from a lot of people is, hey, I'm not skilled in this AI, so I'm just going to block or I'm not going to work on it. I think that also, as I said, that culture and the safety to say, hey, listen, you're going to learn, we're going to skill you into new areas and new technologies and how you're going to help us navigate, because they bring very, very needed domain expertise.
No, absolutely. So, and we're talking about how can companies maximize the use of AI in product development while they're still navigating all of these challenges. And really, they can't afford to have too much disruption to critical processes, right? Because the day job needs to continue, and the products need to, continue to fly out the door. So how do people navigate this now?
I think you want to, in some cases, start small, pick a low-hanging fruit use case, maybe an automating of a simple sort of repetitive process, and see how you can roll that out, get some quick wins, embrace the process, what the learnings are. I think the pace is what is important here. You're not going to go into the 6-12 month long sort of evaluation cycle. Do I do it or not? Get started, quickly, and, enable your teams to be more dedicated, learn quickly, so that you could pivot or, recalibrate as needed. Again, the other side of this should be, we should challenge the traditional way of thinking. And that's where the rubber meets the road, right? And, Ben, I'm sure, has a lot of things to say on this.
Yeah. Ben?
I think where we're at right now with AI capability and what's been proven already, we're at the beginning of what's really an exponential growth function. I think, Ravi, you said it before, this is not a trend. It's not a moment in time. AI is the future. And so for companies facing a choice of, do you put a meaningful effort and investment into AI, or do you wait and see? I think the companies who wait and see for another 18 months, they're never going to be able to catch up to the companies that are already on that exponential growth curve. So there's really a kind of an existential choice here for a lot of companies. And how do you go into AI, but do it in the right way that, respects everything we talked about before in terms of bringing your employees along, right? And doing this safely and not getting lost in all of the complex choices out there. That's what leaders need to reckon with, and they need to have a strategy for it.
Well said. Thank you both so much for sharing these insights with us. It seems like for companies that rely on R&D to deliver value for their organization, AI is already becoming a massive differentiator. Adopting it effectively and scaling it safely will be how some companies leap ahead of others. Winning the hearts and minds of human users will be fundamental. And from a governance perspective, companies need to build the muscle to evaluate, integrate, and deploy models and other AI-based tools quickly into their workflows. So, Ravi, thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Daphne.
It's great to hear your perspectives. And Ben, thanks for bringing your perspectives, and thanks for chairing that fascinating panel at the McKinsey R&D Leaders Forum.
Of course. Yeah, it was a great event, and really happy to replicate a part of that conversation with all of our listeners here.
Fantastic. I can't wait for the next one to see how things have advanced from today. You've been listening to McKinsey Talks Operations with me, Daphne Luchtenberg. If you like what you heard, subscribe and stay tuned. Another great episode starts now.